came through early, before I'd even finished my coffee. No greeting, no context, just a single sentence that felt like it had been drafted, reviewed, and approved before it ever reached me. We no longer trust you. I stared at the screen longer than I meant to, not because it shocked me, but because of how clean it sounded. Final, corporate, like a notice you'd get from HR after years of service, not from your own mother. I typed one word back. Understood. Then I set my phone face down on the counter and left for work like nothing had happened. 2 days later, a voicemail appeared from a number I didn't recognize. The woman on the line sounded careful, slightly rushed, the way people do when they're trying to sound calm about something that isn't. She said her name was Karen Walsh and that she was an attorney calling on behalf of my parents. She asked me to call her back as soon as possible. Urgent, she said, polite. That was when I knew the message hadn't been the end of anything, it had been the beginning. Before I go any further, if you've ever been shut out by people who were supposed to protect you, you'll understand why this story matters. My name is Elaine Parker. I'm in my early 40s now, and for most of my adult life, I was the person in my family who made things work without being asked. I lived in Colorado, just outside Fort Collins, close enough to be useful, far enough to pretend I had my own life. I had a stable job, a consistent income, and a routine that didn't look impressive from the outside, but quietly held everything together. I wasn't flashy, I didn't talk about money, I didn't post about achievements, I just handled things. Growing up, I learned early that love in our house sounded a lot like responsibility. If something broke, I fixed it. If a bill arrived unpaid, I covered it. If a conversation started to turn uncomfortable, I smoothed it over. My mother, Judith, liked to tell people she was proud of how independent I was, but there was always something underneath that pride, something unspoken. Because I could handle more, I should, and because I was the oldest, I always would. My father stayed out of most conflict. He sat at the head of the table, nodded when decisions were announced, and rarely questioned how things were paid for or who had stepped in. Silence was his contribution. Peace, at least on the surface, was the family rule. Then there was my younger sister, Brooke. She was charming, quick to laugh, and always one step away from having things figured out. A job that didn't work out, a rent issue that came up unexpectedly, a plan that just needed a little more time and a little more help. My parents worried about her constantly. I was reminded not to judge, to be patient, to remember that family helps family. So I did. For years, I took care of the financial side of things without ever being asked directly. Mortgage payments when my parents were short, utility bills that somehow became overdue, repairs after storms, insurance gaps, car issues that couldn't wait. No one sat me down and thanked me. It was simply understood that I would step in. And I told myself that this was what being a good daughter looked like. From the outside, we looked solid. Holidays were polite, photos were posted, conversations stayed light. But underneath that, there was a quiet imbalance I didn't fully name at the time. I wasn't included in decisions. I was informed after the fact. When something worked out, it was a family success. When something needed fixing, it somehow became mine. I didn't realize how long I'd been playing that role until the message arrived, until one sentence made it clear that my place in the family had never been as secure as I'd believed. Looking back, the signs were always there. I just kept choosing not to read them, because for a long time, I thought if I kept saying yes, it would eventually mean something. The shift didn't happen all at once. It came in small, uncomfortable moments that were easy to explain away if you didn't want to see them. A charge on an account that didn't line up with what I remembered. A bill I was certain I'd already paid, showing up again. When I asked about it, I got the same responses every time. It's temporary. We'll fix it next month. Don't make this a big deal. Eventually, I stopped asking. That was my first real mistake. A few weeks later, I was standing in line at a grocery store when I saw a photo online. My parents were standing in front of the house, smiling wide, like they'd crossed some kind of finish line. Brooke stood between them, her arm looped through my mother's, her kids dressed in matching outfits. The caption talked about new beginnings, about pride, about how lucky they all were. The comments poured in, congratulating Brooke, praising her for holding everything together, talking about how strong the family was. My name wasn't mentioned, not once. I read it twice, then again. I told myself it was nothing. Social media wasn't real life. I paid, put my phone away, and drove home with that familiar tightness in my chest, the one I'd learned to live with. After that, it got harder to ignore. The family group chat shifted. Jokes landed differently. Someone commented on how nice it must be to have support whenever you need it. Another message followed with a laughing reaction. No one said my name, but everyone knew who they meant. I typed responses and deleted them. I didn't want to seem sensitive. I didn't want to be difficult. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. I was at the house, in the backyard, doing what I'd done so many times before, taking care of something that no longer felt like it belonged to me. The kitchen door was open, voices carrying easily into the yard. I recognized them instantly. My mother's voice, low and confident. Brooke's laugh, light and careless. They weren't whispering. Brooke was talking about how smooth everything would be once it was finalized. My mother responded with a sound that almost passed for relief. Then Brooke said it. She's not family. She's just the sponsor. There was no anger in her voice, no hesitation, just certainty. My mother didn't correct her. I stood there longer than I should have, long enough for the meaning to settle fully, long enough to understand that this wasn't a misunderstanding or a moment taken out of context. It was how they talked when they thought I wasn't around. It was how they saw me when there was nothing to gain from pretending otherwise. I didn't confront them. I didn't cry. I walked out through the side gate and sat in my car until my hands stopped shaking. That was the moment something finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, completely. I realized I hadn't been part of the family structure at all. I had been a resource, a backup plan, a line item that made everything else possible. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I didn't confront anyone after that afternoon. I didn't ask questions. I didn't demand explanations. I went quiet in a way that surprised even me. Not the kind of silence that waits to be noticed, but the kind that steps aside and starts watching. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table with the overhead light off, the room lit only by the glow of my laptop. I opened my accounts and began pulling records I hadn't looked at closely in years. Payments, bills, repairs, insurance. Each line felt familiar, like rereading journal entries I didn't realize I'd been writing month after month, year after year. Always on time, always steady. I didn't feel angry yet. I felt focused. I made a folder and started saving everything, calmly, methodically. When something didn't make sense, I flagged it and moved on. I wasn't trying to prove betrayal. I was trying to understand the shape of it. And the more I looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't generosity that had gotten out of hand. It was dependence that had been normalized. A few days later, I spoke to a lawyer. I didn't frame it as a family crisis. I didn't bring emotion into it. I asked practical questions, the kind you ask when you're trying to understand systems instead of people. What happens when someone assumes financial control without consent? What options exist when boundaries are crossed quietly over time? I listened more than I talked. I took notes. I didn't tell her what I planned to do. When the call ended, I slept better than I had in weeks. The message from my mother came the next morning. Same sentence, no trust, no access, locks changed, codes updated. It was written like policy, not grief. I replied the same way I had before. Understood. Then I turned my phone face down and went to work. That was the moment I stopped reacting and started deciding. I didn't cancel anything right away. I didn't announce changes. I let routines continue just long enough to finish preparing. I gathered emails that showed expectations instead of requests, messages that assumed my compliance, conversations where silence had been mistaken for agreement. By the end of the week, everything I needed was organized. Not to punish anyone, not to make a point, to protect myself, to reclaim what had been taken, slowly, politely, and without permission. I looked around my apartment differently then, noticing how little of my life actually belonged to me anymore. Even my time felt allocated elsewhere. That realization hurt more than any accusation, but it sharpened something inside me. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was drawing a line, one I should have drawn years earlier, and preparing to stand behind it without flinching. They thought my silence meant compliance. They believed the door had closed on me. They didn't realize I was the one stepping back to see the whole structure clearly for the first time, quietly, carefully, with intention. 2 days after my mother's message, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring. Then it rang again. When I finally answered, the voice on the other end was careful, rehearsed. She introduced herself again as the attorney representing my parents. Her tone was polite but strained, like someone trying to hold a door shut while something heavy pressed from the other side. She said there had been a misunderstanding. She said everyone hoped to resolve this privately. She asked if I had a few minutes to talk. I told her I was busy. She paused, then asked when I wouldn't be. That was when I understood how quickly the balance had shifted. 2 days earlier, I was someone they could lock out with a text. Now I was someone their lawyer couldn't afford to ignore. I didn't agree to a meeting. I let the call end without committing to anything. That afternoon, another message came through from my mother. Longer, softer. She said she was hurt by my distance. She said family matters shouldn't be handled by outsiders. She said we could talk like adults if I was willing. I didn't respond. The confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened where everything in my family always happened, at a gathering meant to look warm and celebratory from the outside. A room full of relatives, polite laughter, familiar faces pretending not to notice tension because acknowledging it would make them responsible for it. I arrived late on purpose. When I walked in, conversation slowed. A few people smiled too quickly. My sister looked up, froze for half a second, then looked away. My mother stiffened but didn't turn around. My father stared at the table in front of him like it might offer instructions. I didn't sit down. I didn't greet anyone. I waited. Eventually, my mother stood and cleared her throat, ready to steer the moment back into something manageable. That was when I spoke. I didn't come to argue, I said. My voice didn't shake. I came to be clear. That got their attention. I reached into my bag and placed a thin folder on the table. No dramatics, no raised voice, just paper meeting wood. For years, I continued, I covered payments related to the house, monthly expenses, ongoing bills, repairs when things broke, insurance when things went wrong. I didn't do it because I was asked. I did it because I was expected to. My sister scoffed. You're exaggerating. I slid the folder toward her. Those are summaries, I said. Everything's rounded, nothing complicated. Totals, dates, patterns. She didn't touch it. My mother spoke next, disbelief sharpening her voice. Those were gifts. I nodded slowly. If they were gifts, there would have been consent. There wasn't. The lawyer shifted in her seat. I went on. I talked about access that had been assumed, decisions made without me, how my name disappeared in stories where my support remained. I didn't accuse, I described. I didn't call anyone names, I used facts. Then I said the sentence that made the room go quiet. I heard how you talk about me when you think I'm not listening. My sister's face drained of color. I didn't repeat the words right away. I let the silence stretch. I wanted them to remember the moment, not just the phrase. When I spoke again, I said it once, calmly. She's not family. She's just the sponsor. Someone inhaled sharply. A chair scraped. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. I looked directly at her.
You didn't correct that. That's not what she meant, my father said, finally speaking. I know exactly what she meant, I replied, because of everything that came before and everything that followed. The lawyer leaned forward. Elaine, if we could just take a moment. I am taking a moment, I said. This one. I explained what the next steps would look like, not as a threat, as a process, an accounting, a return of funds taken under the assumption of obligation rather than agreement. I said I wasn't interested in punishment or humiliation. I was interested in responsibility. My sister stood abruptly. You can't do this. This will ruin everything. I met her eyes. It already did. I'm just naming it. My mother started crying then, not loud sobs, controlled tears, the kind she used when she wanted sympathy without admitting fault. She talked about sacrifice, about everything she'd given, about how families don't keep score. I didn't, I said, until you did. The lawyer asked for time, asked for privacy, asked if we could step away and talk through options. I agreed to one conversation. We moved to a quieter corner. Her voice dropped. They're willing to settle, she said. I'm not interested in quiet, I replied. I'm interested in complete. She hesitated. That may take time. It already took years, I said. I've been patient. She looked at the folder, then back at me. You have documentation. Yes. Recordings. Yes. If this goes public, I said, I won't control that. I'll just tell the truth. That was when her composure cracked, just enough for me to see the panic underneath. She excused herself to make a call. Across the room, my family sat frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. They looked smaller somehow, like people realizing the rules they'd been playing by no longer applied. When the lawyer returned, her voice had changed. Respectful, measured. She said they would review everything. She said they'd be in touch within a few days. I nodded. That works. As I turned to leave, my mother called my name. I stopped but didn't turn around. You didn't have to do it like this, she said. I looked back then. Neither did you. I walked out without another word. No applause, no parking lot confrontation, just space, clean and quiet, and finally, mine. 3 days later, the lawyer called again. This time, she didn't waste time on pleasantries. She said the amount would be returned in full. The transfer would happen by the end of the week. She asked if there were any other conditions. "There is one," I said. She waited. "No more contact, not through you, not through anyone else." There was a pause. Then she said she understood. When the funds came through, I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady, like something that had been leaning at the wrong angle for years had finally been set upright. They had said they didn't trust me. I trusted facts. Facts laid out in the open don't argue back. The money arrived quietly. No announcement, no apology attached. Just a clean transfer that confirmed what had already happened. The balance settled. The numbers aligned. And with that, the longest argument of my life ended without another word being spoken. I didn't feel relief right away. What I felt was stillness. I packed over the next few days, slowly choosing what to take and what to leave behind. Not just objects, habits, expectations, the reflex to check my phone every time it buzzed. I moved into a small apartment in a different city in Colorado, the kind of place where the windows let in too much morning light and no one knew my last name. It was quiet in a way that didn't feel empty. The family group chat disappeared from my screen. No new messages replaced it. No late-night calls, no carefully worded updates disguised as concern. Just silence. At first, it felt unnatural, like standing in a room after noise stops and waiting for something to crash. Nothing did. I started noticing small things again, how my evenings stretched when no one needed anything from me, how my weekends stayed mine, how my thoughts felt less crowded. I slept better. I ate when I was hungry, not when it was convenient for someone else. No one reached out to explain. No one tried to repair what had been broken. That told me everything I needed to know. Closure didn't come from conversation. It came from clarity. People sometimes ask if it hurt to walk away. The honest answer is, it would have hurt more to stay. I didn't lose my family. I stopped financing a role that erased me. And in the quiet that followed, I realized something important. Peace doesn't always arrive as forgiveness. Sometimes it arrives as distance and stays because it's earned. I used to think family meant access, who could reach you, rely on you, take from you without asking. I was wrong. Love isn't measured by how much you give until you disappear. It's measured by whether you're still seen when you stop. I didn't lose my family. I stopped confusing obligation with affection. If this story resonated with you, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, share it with friends who might need to hear it, and comment below with your perspective or the key lesson you took away. You're not alone.